Good evening. Thanks to everyone for coming out tonight on this Monday night to hear from our two county board candidates about the arts in Arlington. I am Janet Kopenhaver, the chair and founder of Embracing Arlington Arts. That's a citizens group that's dedicated to advocating for the arts in Arlington, celebrating the contributions that the arts make to our community, and spreading the word about the quality and diversity of Arlington arts organization events and performances throughout the year. I have put on your chairs, and it's on our Facebook page, more information about the event, as our organization, as well as our October 4th second annual celebration of the arts in Arlington. So please mark that down. We have about 20 local Arlington restaurants who are donating some pretty good food. We have beer and wine, and we're going to have a costume contest with first place being a $250 car detail voucher. And the contest is come as your favorite piece of artwork. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then to cap off the evening, we're going to have an hour-long live concert by the Arlington band, the Walkaways. So hope you can come out for that. And 100% of the proceeds will be going towards to benefit Embracing Arlington Arts and our capital campaign to raise funds for a standalone quality performing arts and live music venue here in Arlington. So lots more coming on that. So we're also thrilled to be hosting this forum tonight. I want to give a big thanks to Arlington Independent Media, who is hosting this, and as well as taping it and videotaping it. We'll have a link for it, and it will be airing sometime in the near future. I want to thank John and Matt for coming out, and I know you're very busy, but the fact that you're here, sitting here to talk about the arts, shows how much you both support and value the arts in the county. So thanks again for being here. So just some brief ground rules for both our candidates and our audience. The candidates are each going to have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. We did a coin toss, and Matt will be going first for the intro, and then followed by John, and then I will be throwing out the first question. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond to each question, and then they'll have 2 minutes each for closing remarks. Carlos over here, Carlos Velasquez, has volunteered to be our timekeeper. So candidates, when you have 1 minute left, he will show you the 1 minute remaining sign, and then when your time has expired, he will show you time expired. So you got to wrap it up then. For our audience members, because we have pretty much of a time crunch here, we're going to ask you to refrain from applauding or anything to use up time, because we want to ask as many questions as possible. So as I mentioned, I will ask the first question, and then we will throw it out to the floor. So you will ask a question, I'll repeat it, so we have it for the videotape, and so our candidates are sure to find out exactly what you're asking. We are asking, because this is a forum on the arts, that you keep your questions related to the arts. There'll be other debates where you can ask other questions as well. So with that, I'm going to let Matt open it up for his 3 minute opening, followed by John.
Sure. Well, thank you, Janet, and thank you, Arlington Independent Media. Also, thank you, Embracing Arlington Arts, for being a part of making sure this happens. Just to introduce myself, there are 2 or 3 people who may not know me in the audience. So I'll tell you, I work for Native American students. I serve Arlington in 3 big ways. I'm chair of the School Budget Advisory Committee this past year, and I've stepped down now that I'm the nominee. And I also work on the Housing Commission and then on the Joint Facilities Advisory Commission, which is a long name for helping to work on planning for future facilities for the county and the schools. I'm running because I think we need new vision for Arlington's future. I think specifically we need new vision on our economy so that we grow and can address school facilities. We're behind a little bit, and we must have excellent schools. That's the history of Arlington. We need to keep doing that. I also think that that additional economic room, if we invest wisely, can lead to good work that we could do on housing affordability and on keeping our great quality of life. We have to be fiscally responsible, but we also have to make smart investments in the future, and that's what I'll do. I think it's just fortuitous. It's great that we're here together at this site on the arts, because the arts has to be a part of our economic vision for how we grow, and it has to be a part of how we maintain and enhance our quality of life. It's not just economic, and it's not just quality of life, it's both. I also think it's interesting that we're here because this past year in the budget there was a 20% cut proposed by the manager to the Arlington Independent Media. I signed the petition because I didn't think that was a good idea. I thought it was short-sighted, and I thought it also, the cuts were deep enough that went to the structure of the organization. If there was ever a moment when Arlington Independent Media was important, it's this moment. We need to enhance and make sure we're hearing from voices we might not always hear from. That's the vision, those are the ideas, that's the economic development that I think would be critical, and that vision is what I'll bring if I have the honor of serving you on the Arlington County Board.
Thanks, Matt. John, you're up.
Thanks, Janet. And thanks to the arts community for coming out tonight. Also, thank you to Arlington Independent Media. As folks will recall, the board did unanimously vote to restore a substantial part of AIM's budget. AIM is the megaphone that helps give voice to so many organizations and communities. But before we get to your questions, I want to make a few personal observations on the arts. Mary's and my two sons attended arts camps sponsored by Parks and Recreation. One played the trumpet, the other the violin. Through 16 years involved with our boys in Arlington Public Schools, we know firsthand that the arts are essential to a well-rounded education and prepare our kids emotionally and intellectually for adulthood. On the county board, I've represented Arlington County at ethnic festivals, including just yesterday at Ecuador. The Arts Commission's Spaces and Services grants, while modest, can make a big difference for our ethnic communities. I've stolen away to the photo gallery in Knock to view Felicia McPhail's calligraphy and the work of Romeo Taylor, another one of your Arts Grants awardees. I'm glad to see the Arts Commission viewing their decisions through a lens of equity. And as I run for re-election, I've laid out my vision for community-centered government by stressing three key themes. First, managing our growth. Second, greater openness and transparency. And third, ensuring that cost and value are a part of every community conversation. What do these have to do with the arts? First, if we're to thrive as a growing community, we need the arts to grow with us. Our arts policy recognizes that we must create a climate that is conducive to the growth and development of the arts. Our government must be as innovative and creative as any artist, dancer, or actor. When I heard that the Arlington Artists Alliance was struggling to secure the proper permits to open its new pop-up gallery and studios in Clarendon, I worked with staff to slice through the red tape and get to yes. In Roslyn, I assisted the Alcove, a new pop-up literary venue. Proceeds benefit children's literacy. The arts so easily are able to combine economic benefits and social benefits. Head south to 4 Mile Run Valley. As County Board Liaison to the Master Planning Working Group, I work to facilitate inclusion of an arts district. Second, greater openness, transparency, and inclusion. I think people appreciate the openness and transparent manner with the way the Arts Commission judges the applicants for the arts grants. I hope an equally transparent process will shape the pending update of the 2004 Public Art Master Plan and the implementation plan for your 2017 document, Enriching Lives. And third, cost and value. The financial challenge of meeting such core services as schools, transit, public safety, community infrastructure, and the social safety net will loom large over everything we do. But arts are an integral part of a thriving community. We can and must be enterprising with public and private sector collaboration to sustain our creative culture. We're up to that challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So to start us off, I had sent you both a press release, and it's on some of your seats here. It had some statistics with respect to the arts in Arlington. This was according to an Americans for the Arts study, and it stated or it found that over $18 million of economic activity is derived from audience expenditures at arts events. So it's pretty much an important economic industry here in the county. And then drilling down these numbers, which is actually my favorite statistic, is they found that arts and culture event attendees spend an average of $24.66 on top of the price of their ticket, and with more than half of that amount going to restaurants, so what they eat beforehand or go out afterwards. So as a county board member, and John, you've touched on a little bit, but I want to drill and get some specifics. So if you are elected to the county board or re-elected to the county board, what specific initiatives will you pursue to ensure that the arts keep growing and remain strong and in the many years to come, which actually impacts so many other industries in our county? You want to take that one first, and then
Sure.
we'll go back and forth?
Sure,
Okay.
happy to. So I think we talked, there's of course the challenge grants, and seeding the arts is critical. And that's a small piece of the overall budget, but I think that that is an area where you can have a catalytic impact, and it's partnering with organizations and institutions that are in need of growth that I think is a key piece of that challenge grant program. It's only $30,000. It wasn't there last year. I think it's critical that it continue. The folks I've talked to, it can be an important factor in whether you grow and whether you have that opportunity to partner. So I think that is something that we should support. It is on a relative basis to a $2.7 or so million set of expenditures. I think that that is a good use of our funding, and it can stretch a lot further with the corporate matches that come. I also think that it's critical to have an environment that is about partnerships. I think we must, yes, we need to be fiscally responsible, but there's so much you can do with in-kind programs or partnering with institutions to help them grow, and that's the case with some of our greatest organizations that have been here for years. The Macaulay Dance Studio has benefited in part, but there are numerous others that seeding, not necessarily all of the funding on an ongoing basis, but seeding and partnering, those are two specific things. And one of them, of course, the challenge grants is a specific budgetary commitment that I think is critical, but also partnering with all of the institutions so that they grow and that they thrive is a critical role that I think the county board should play.
John.
Sure, Janet. So your question hit upon the economic value of the arts and the money that that's throwing off in our communities, and you're absolutely right. Just to give you a couple of examples, back in 2015, the county board had a very tough decision as to whether or not to help Signature Theater restructure its loan. The Signature Theater has had some tough economic times because of the recession and a number of other ways, or a number of other happenings. But the board at the time, including myself, all unanimously determined that Signature Theater was such an important asset and catalyst to the arts, especially in Shirlington, but also across the county, that we needed to do what we could to keep it. And I think that has paid off. Now, at the time the argument was made, well, the flow from Signature Theater will help patronize the restaurants and the bars and so forth in Shirlington, and it has. At the same time, you'll note that there are a few vacancies in Shirlington. Things come in, they go out, and so forth. But, just the reality of what a vital asset Signature is really hit home to me when I attended the open house a couple weeks ago, and got to talk with a number of the board of directors and so forth. Another example, I mentioned the Arlington Artists Alliance pop-up gallery in Clarendon. That was a dead corner. How many people remember Harry's Tap Room? And then Harry's Tap Room gave way to Fuego. And then the corner sat empty for, I think it was almost 2 years. And then I heard somebody came to me and said that the Arlington Artists Alliance was having problems getting the permits and the approvals needed within our county government for their pop-up gallery. And so I brokered a meeting with senior staff and started asking questions, and that helped. And so finally, the Artists Alliance was able to get its permitting and approvals. It opened, I guess, maybe about 6 weeks ago. I don't know how many of you, I know some of you, I think, were at the grand opening. There's going to be another opening coming up. The Alcove down in the heart of Roslyn, dead space that the landlord couldn't rent in a brand new office building. And now it is the Alcove, which just opened last week, a literary place, a bookstore, a nonprofit that is going to be selling books, vinyl, and so forth to customers. Great prices. You can't beat the prices. And all of those profits, or those proceeds, I should say, are going to be plowed into literacy efforts for kids. So that's the type of thing that arts can do all over the county. We have to make sure that our climate embraces the arts and is conducive to that type of growth.
Okay, thanks, John. So we're going to open it up. And right there in the back. Okay, so just to kind of recap, the question was how, or your vision, or how you can help give school children more time to actually experience the arts and do more field trips, especially in lieu of their test taking and SOLs. You either want to take a stab at that one. Yeah, perfect.
So, David, that's a great question. And I know Miriam Miller is here in the audience with Opera Nova as well. And Opera Nova, I think, really stands out in trying to penetrate that demographic and reach school kids. You have done a great job of that. You know, one of the luxuries that either Matt or I have was we knock on doors and go around into the community and we get asked questions about certain schools-related issues. And they bring up boundaries or they bring up iPads or something. You know, we can say, well, you know, we're happy to listen to what you have to say, but we are county board office seekers, not school board office seekers. So it's very important. I guess my first word of advice, and I'm sure you're doing this, is reach out to the school board. You know, I guess we don't have the school board candidates here tonight, Barbara Cannon and Audrey Clement. But at any rate, you're right. So I would say engage with the school board, make sure that the school board continues to value the arts in its programming. Frankly, I think that our school board does a pretty good job of arts curriculum. As I said, my boys participated in arts classes and arts camps all through school. But there's always more that can be done with our youth. There's no doubt about it.
Thanks, Matt.
So I started my career as a teacher, and I watched as some students struggled with the SOL, the tests, the standardized tests, and so I think it's a valid concern. I also watched as students lit up when they had the opportunity to go on field trips and to express themselves. There's no learning for a child quite like them talking. So I think that we have to emphasize it. It is the case that the school board is making many of those decisions, but it is, I believe it's crucial for us to show interest and commitment to the arts and to reaching every child. And particularly, John said it, but both of you have shown extraordinary leadership about getting to kids most in need, which is near and dear to my heart because of what I do for my day job. So I do think that there are messages that the county board should continue to send about how much we value the arts, how much we want to make sure every child has an opportunity to go on field trips. You know, the Kennedy Center is an Arlington institution, and it's critical that we continue to value it. But that's not the only field trip that can open up worlds for kids. So I think and we should be concrete that funding is a piece of whether you're able to do those field trips. When and where I taught in Houston a long time ago, it was hard to have the resources to make sure that kids could do field trips so that they could get the experiences that they want. That can totally change the way a child learns for years. So I do think it's critical to value it, and it's important. I think the county board and the school board have come a long ways in terms of partnering, but I think there's still a ways to go so that we work more closely together and make sure that our schools are not just the best in Virginia, but are world class and are serving every student, including the students that you're most concerned about, well.
Thank you. Another question. Okay, just to reiterate and shorten it. No, that's okay. I just can't remember all that. Obviously, the county budget has some limitations, some strains that they're dealing with, and Marcia mentioned the grant program as well as the Challenge Grant program. Both are financial programs, grant programs that are for the nonprofit art organizations. So her question is basically, considering all the strains on the budget, where would you put the arts, and what would you think is essential for funding for those programs?
Sure, I think it's my turn to start.
Yes.
So I would say both that it's it's going to have to jockey with other programs. That's the reality of where we are, and that it's essential. And you want proof that it's essential, you look at property owners, JBG Smith and others. They care about placemaking because it is very, very important to our economic growth. So we have to value the arts, and we have to value, in particular, the challenge grants. I think is critical. I think that, you know, there is a study that will be ongoing as to the best, within the expenditures for the arts, as to the best way to provide video servicing. And of course, Arlington Independent Media is part of that conversation. I don't prejudge that study, but I do think it's possible that that $30,000 is has the greatest multiplier effect for those organizations and for our economy as a whole. And so I think that's critical. That would be last on my list to cut from what I've seen and the analysis that I've done. As to whether there are savings, you know, I leave that study to find whether there are savings on that. I guess I would say as well that if we view, and this is the center of this whole piece, the whole decision that we'll be making over the coming months is, if we view this as a zero-sum game, then Arlington will lose over the long term. We have to see it as how we can grow together and how we can have a vision to find the right investments to move us forward so that our budget is not so extraordinarily tight. Because, you know, it's not fun being chair of the school budget committee when there's a $20 million gap. We have to think about how do we create an environment where millennials don't want to go to the wharf and the Anthem, and instead they want to stay in Crystal City, or at least they're open to it so that they can bicycle and stay and work and create the businesses that are the center of Arlington leading again. And that's going to be a theme that I'll talk about it again and again. So that's a little bit on the budget, and then the vision of how we can't say, and I think it's time to be honest and just, I wrote an opinion a year ago. I agree it was the right decision on the artisphere. I do think that you have to look at the business plan of any space, and I know that there's a shortage of space, but we need to be fiscally reasonable and not forget that investing in the future worked in spades with the Orange Line, and we have to think about what's the analogous way that we can do that in this generation.
John. Sure. So I think Matt's right. There's no doubt that the arts have an essential place in our economy, in our fabric of our arts. The arts make us human, and we need that dimension in our lives. At the same time, you know, we have some economic headwinds. Our commercial office vacancy rate was over 20% about a year ago. It's now it got down actually a number of months ago to only 18%. Now it's ticking back up to about 19–20%. Who knows what the next surprise that the folks across the river in Washington are going to throw at us. So we are ratcheting up our economic development game and fighting to retain businesses and recruit new businesses. And we're not just talking about big business like Nestle and Gerber, frankly. We're talking about those entrepreneurs on Columbia Pike and Lee Highway. And I say that because that is how we are going to grow our economy. That's going to throw off more money for more resources to be allocated to the arts. But the arts do have to step up to the plate, I think, maybe to a greater degree than the arts community has, in terms of really leveraging those private sector resources. The government can be a catalyst. It can help with climate change of a sort. But the government can't do it all. Individuals, everybody in this room, can do a lot in a forward-thinking manner for our arts. You know, we were talking about school kids the other day. It just occurred to me, you know, many of you don't have kids anymore, or maybe you never have kids, but go to a kids' concert, go to a play at a high school or a middle school, or go to an art show and watch those kids perform or produce or emote, whatever the case may be. We have to keep the grants. I would like to see actually a bigger challenge grant amount. When we restored most of the AIM budget this year, we also imposed a matching requirement on Arlington Independent Media. And that was a little controversial, but we felt it was the right thing to do, to really encourage, because I suppose you could use the word force, but to really make sure that AIM would further reach out into that community and bring in those private sector dollars. It's a partnership, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Yes.
So with respect to Signature Theater, we meet on an annual basis with Signature. We require that their books, that we review their audited financial statements on a yearly basis. We bring them in. We bring in their artistic director and their finance person. We talk about their finances. We talk about their economic structure, what their gate is in terms of ticket sales, how well they're doing in promotions and tchotchkes and all the accoutrements of Signature Theater. And we dialogue with them and we talk with them and we have those metrics to make sure that they are performing, if you will, according to the terms of the loan agreement. I feel that we're in a pretty good place. We hope that we won't have to do that restructuring again, knock on wood. So this weekend, go to Signature.
Exactly. Did you want to comment on?
Sure. I think the decision on Signature a couple of years ago, I guess 2015, I agreed with that decision to invest there. I do think we have to have economic metrics, but we also have to have quality of life metrics. And the business plan that's there in the terms would be what I would go back to evaluate the ongoing viability and success of Signature. My impression from everything I've seen and read is that at the moment doing well enough. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be challenges. But I do think as you juxtapose the decision on the Artisphere and that one and the decision on Signature, there's some fundamentals that I think are more positive in Signature's case.
Thank you.
First of all, with respect to cultural equity, honestly, we are looking at that concept not just in terms of culture in Arlington County, but we are looking at that concept across the board. Environmental equity, economic equity, educational equity, socioeconomic equity. So we are approaching all of our county policies through a lens of equity, of fairness, of justice, of equality. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, as you indicated, we provide space and services grants. The county does through the Arts Commission for space and services. Just this year, I represented the county at the Peruvian Festival. Last week, as I said yesterday, at the Ecuadorian Festival. There are a number of other ethnic festivals. We, even though a lot of those folks actually no longer live in the county because our demographics are changing, we still hold dear to an attitude of welcoming immigrants. And so as long as I have anything to say about it, we are going to continue, knock on wood, to be welcoming, as we have all stated in a unanimous fashion time and time again. And one of the manifestations that yields is the funding of those ethnic festivals. Romeo at the photo gallery, who also received a $5,000 grant from the Arts Commission, an African-American, very accomplished painter. So there's no doubt that we need to continue to reach out to our ethnic communities and really prize and emphasize that diversity. Carlos, I think that there might be, the Human Rights Commission does an amazing job of having multifaceted programs on everything from criminal justice to immigrants' rights, and perhaps a program. I'm the board liaison of the Human Rights Commission. Maybe we have a program on the intersection between human rights and cultural equity and the arts. let me think about another one here. I just think maybe going back and making sure that we are mindful when we update the public art plan and update the facilities plan, and when we look at the Enriching Lives document that was a labor of love, Janet, for you, I know, that maybe we need to look at that again with that lens of equity to take this to a higher level. Thank you.
Sure. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah. Sure. So it's a good question, and it's timely. There have been changes, and equity and inclusion are at stake at this moment. So to me, cultural equity is significantly about going to communities. I was at the Peruvian Festival as well, and going to communities and being open and valuing perspectives different from your own culture. And that, I think, is critical, and lifting up cultures that historically have not been a key part of our mainstream in our discussion. So I think it's personal to me. I am not Native, but I work at a Native American organization. So respecting and lifting up Native children and Native students is central to what I do every day. So I think we need to not just be, and I do think it is important for each of the festivals, but it's not just be there, but be seeking out cultures different from our own, so we bring them into the inclusive history of Arlington, and increasingly inclusive history of Arlington. So that's what it means to me personally. I do think there are specific concrete steps. It's a good question. I think an example of the sort of outreach we need to be valuing and making sure that there is space for. I recently went to the opening exhibit of the Black History Museum on some of the work the history of Roslyn, and I think that's providing space and being open to joint uses and space that could be available is also a critical element of cultural equity. I do think that there's the history of what happened, eradicating racism, and the work that has happened sort of 6, 8, 10 years ago. Those conversations are ongoing in our community, but that doesn't mean that they're ongoing. They have, as I see it, been spread so that we're having a community-wide conversation to address this critical issue. So it's a challenge. I think considering whether such a conversation is right at this time in consultation with the folks that are working on it would be a specific step that's worth exploring. So those are steps that I think are important. It's a key question that we have to keep working on as we evolve and change as a community.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Matt.
So I think I'm to start. So I think perhaps on Saturday I knocked on a door, and studio space for this painter was a critical issue for her, and housing affordability was another issue that she immediately mentioned for so many people that she knows. And that's a difficult challenge. I've worked on it since I moved to Arlington, and I think it's something that we need to really take seriously. And there are creative solutions on housing affordability, and then there's also where you stand and how you value in our budgets, making sure that we have key investments so that we can have as much housing affordability as possible. So I think on studio space, I think 4 Mile Run is an opportunity for us to have an arts district where there's been a lot of discussion in the 4 Mile Run planning process, but it's important for us to engage and invest and prioritize it. There are other parts of the county, of course, where there are artists, but we have a real opportunity to seize it and drive economic growth through a district there, and I think that's worth considering. With respect to affordable housing, I'll say that there's a home ownership component that we as a community have not done particularly well with. There are artists who desperately want to live here. I was doing a coffee, and a mom said, "My son grew up in Arlington. He'd love to live in Arlington. He's an artist. He can't afford to live here." And he's a good artist. She was darn clear about that. He's a damn good artist. And, you know, sometimes you trust parents, and this time I trusted her. You know, she said, and I want him to live here. And you know, having an answer to that one is a really difficult challenge. But what I'll say is that Richmond has tried an approach that's a creative solution that involves a co-op and a nonprofit, whereby the homeowner in that co-op gets half the value, the increase in value of the property, and the nonprofit keeps the other half, so that that space can still be available for home ownership opportunities for artists, teachers, firefighters, police officers, the middle class, which in Arlington, being middle class is not easy. And being middle class means your median income is approximately $100,000. And so we need to make sure that we're caring for folks right there who need that opportunity to get up the economic ladder. And artists are darn sure part of it. And we've already talked about the multiplier effect that artists bring. And we have to think about home ownership opportunities. We also need to recognize that there's an importance to temporary housing solutions, shorter term housing solutions for someone who wants to move here, work as an artist, and then may move to another community. There are benefits to that. I'm not saying we should be subsidizing that. We should be thinking about how we can encourage a rich arts community and also rental housing as well. So that's what I'd say.
Okay, thanks, Matt. John?
Sure. Thanks, Janet. So a couple things. I do want to just go back to one point when we were talking about the artisphere. I'm very pleased now that the artisphere is back on the tax rolls and paying tens of thousands of dollars in property taxes to Arlington County every year. So, Laura, with respect to your question about how we can help artists thrive, I would say it's multifaceted. First of all, with respect to artists who, after all, are entrepreneurs, they're business people, Cultural Affairs, I think as many of you know who are steeped in the arts community, has a pretty active Arlington Arts Enterprise Group. And that enterprise group actually gives technical assistance to artists on everything from credit card basics to helping them map out a business plan, a marketing plan, that type of thing. That's how our cultural affairs staff and volunteers and artists themselves are connecting with our arts community to help them thrive in their chosen profession. Another way, of course, is venues. And as I mentioned, the Artists Alliance venue, the pop-up in Clarendon that I had a hand in facilitating. Matt mentioned 4 Mile Run. I was the liaison to the 4 Mile Run working group. I continue to be that liaison. We're going to be on the verge of adopting a master plan framework for the entire 4 Mile Run Valley, and in particular for Jenny Dean Park, Shirlington Park, Shirlington Dog Park. We're gonna leave the dogs alone. And that whole 4 Mile Run Valley. And the board unanimously last spring made the decision, which I think was the right decision. We wanted to have, and there was some conflict at first. There was some competition because the arts community, had dreams and visions for what they might want down there. The parks community, and the parks community does not speak with one voice. There are active space folks who would like to see programming in a lot of places. Then there are passive space folks who would just assume that we have mostly forests or largely passive space. And then the athletics and sports community. And all those perspectives are important. And they all convert, and I should also mention the small business community, because that's one of the few remaining light industrial areas in our county. So all of those interests, all of those uses really converge together on 4 Mile Run, down by all those automotive businesses and so forth, and really the gateway to Shirlington. So we huddled and we played with the clay, and we put the dots on the board, and we drew the lines and so forth. So we're now, I think, in a harmonious place in 4 Mile Run where we will have an arts district in harmony with the other uses around, and we'll have that synergy. Well, in terms of who gets the money for the arts, that is something that we are going to be looking at through the planning documents. So we've got the Public Arts Master Plan, which is well on its way to an update, and we're trying to make sure that that process is transparent and inclusive as possible. We've got arts grants, and we talked about the challenge grants. The overall pot for arts grants a year is about $225,000. It hasn't budged in recent years, and I would like to think that, consistent with fiscal realities, and after all, it is true that that certain core services naturally are going to absorb a greater part of the budget. That we might be able to lift that. No promises, obviously, but I think that we really do agree that the arts have a vital place in our community and that we need to leverage funds. Now, in terms of deciding, among the different arts groups and the other kind of categories of the arts, there's so many, and there's more, all the time. It's amazing to me, and I know, Janet, you're not on the Arts Commission anymore because you've transitioned off to do Embracing Arlington Arts, but the Arts Commission, I think, has done a pretty good job of kind of selecting how those grants are going to be apportioned. It's remarkable to me that you have everybody from the barbershop quartet or barbershop group to Opera Nova, and from large groups like Bowen Macaulay to a clogging group, and that because you've gone back and you've invigorated that residency requirement that we've had for some time, but have not been as true to it maybe as the document specified. Some of those arts groups have fallen off. So I'd love your ideas for the question that you pose to us. And I would hope that as we go forward with the Public Art Master Plan, the Embracing Arlington Arts document, and the framework for facilities, that we could work things out to ensure that all the different niches of the arts have a seat at the table and realize some gain from that.
Thanks, John. Matt.
So I think you did a good job of answering a really hard question. I'm not about to go on record as saying I prefer performance versus the others, not in this crowd, not in any crowd. But I think that, a couple of years ago, I did Leadership Arlington and, of course, chose the arts as the area that I wanted to learn most about. My grandfather started an art school, but I did not get his talent, so I wanted to learn about it. And the philosophy that I thought about there with the $215,000 and the seed grants, I do think there is a philosophy that feels like the right approach. You want a solid understanding that you're going to seed arts across different mediums. I do agree that we shouldn't be primarily in the business of heavy funding of specific types of art, and that's part of why I'm most interested in the $215,000, and would like to look in more detail at the remaining amount of the money. I do know that there's, of course, a need for a facility, and that's a huge issue, but I guess seed funding to get folks moving and to get folks on their feet and both producing great art that values our quality of life, but that also is helping them to be economically viable, which is a relevant concern. That's how I would approach your question. And I would duck and run from trying to take a position between a painter and a sculptor, and et cetera. But I do think it's a good question, and the criteria in each of the planning processes are important to get right and to get them united and working together. That's how I'd approach it. So there are two paintings that are meaningful. One is a small piece of art that is a modern piece that my grandfather had and gave to me. And so it's partly about the art, but it's also about seeing the kitchen where I would have breakfast with him, and burnt toast and not coffee, but burnt toast and tea. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is there's a famous Norman Rockwell of, it's called Going to Church. And there's a dad, appears to be a dad, sitting there, reading the newspaper and decidedly not going to church, while his whole family walks out and goes to church. And so that's relevant to me, and it's also a personal connection, just because that's one of the artists that my grandfather got to work with. So,
great, John.
So I'm a son of the Midwest, and grew up in Nebraska. And before I took the covered wagon out to D.C. back in the early 1980s, I lived in Lincoln and Omaha. And an artist that I got to meet back then was a fellow named Keith Jacobshagen, who is a Midwestern landscape artist. And he paints very flat, linear landscapes of the Midwest. Usually they have an agrarian theme, but what's interesting is that the sky takes really about 80% of the painting, and the ground much less than that. I'm also very fond of a photographer in Omaha. I have a collection of his black and white photographs, and I think black and white sometimes in a photograph can really speak to somebody and be not just evocative of the past, but also call attention to architectural details and expressions on people's faces and so forth when you see them in black and white as opposed to color. So I would say that, and I've got those photographs on the hallway in my home. I have both a Keith Jacobshagen print and then original black and white photographs, including one of the Omaha Stockyards, one of the Omaha Stock Exchange, a couple of village scenes, and of a gospel singer in downtown Omaha.
So on October 4th, you will be dressed up as one of these, right?
Janet, I'm not going to wear that wig you wrote to the last
wig. You can
fall.
borrow it whenever you want. Well, thanks again, everyone. I'm sure that if you have additional questions, there's ways to get a hold of both of the candidates. Like I said, we could have been here all night, and I really appreciate everyone coming here and your support of the arts. So on that note, each candidate has 2 minutes for closing remarks, and John?
I think that's first.
No, he has the last round.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, sure. So, from the Columbia Pike Blues Festival to Opera Nova, from Nancy Holt's Dark Sky Park in Roslyn to Doug Hollis's Wave Arbor at Longbridge Park, and from historical lectures at the Hume School Museum to a poetry reading in Central Library, art is all around us. Despite our personal aesthetics, art unifies us. Art makes us whole as individuals, and it can make our community whole as well. We may not agree on every issue, but respectful diversity brings results. I look forward to continued partnership and collaboration with the arts community in the years ahead to realize the promise and vision of the Enriching Lives strategic document, to leverage the 2017 Cultural Facilities Investment Strategic Framework, to update the 2004 Public Art Master Plan, and to facilitate the development of 4 Mile Run Valley Arts District that leverages cultural resources that are already there, that harmonizes with local businesses that are already there, and recognizes the need to preserve area green space and to leverage maximum private investment. To see Knocktown Square and its public art by Walter Hood built, finally. And to encourage APS to better coordinate with cultural affairs and arts groups for venue needs. To work with the Chamber of Commerce, other businesses, higher education institutions, hotels, and others to collaborate on performance space opportunities. and to work with Embracing Arts whenever and wherever we can. I ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 6th. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Matt?
Sure. Thank you, Janet, for hosting, and also Arlington Independent Media, Paul LaValle, and for his leadership, and to all of you for coming tonight. I think that my first experiences with art and the vision that I could glean from what came from my grandfather, as he built his business drawing, and the school was a famous artist school, and it's a business model that would never work in the 21st century, but it worked well enough then. And it was essentially you send in your drawings to New York, and an artist would look at it, mark it up, send it back to you. What I learned from that is that art can be an extraordinary economic engine. And I also learned from him in a wholly different way, in small moments in his garden, what he could observe and see, and how his life improved in such huge ways because when he was drawing and when he was experiencing things through art. It gave me an appreciation that I've kept with me throughout the rest of my life. And I think that that combination of the economic vehicle that art can be, but also how it improves our quality of life, is what we have to be about going forward. The question for me comes back again, would a business like my grandfather's in Arlington now succeed? I don't know the answer to that question. It's a hard question. We do need partnerships. We also need commitment, and relentless commitment to working with the arts community to grow and seed additional art venues. We also have that challenge of finding a venue. That's a huge, again and again you'll hear, finding a place where you can rehearse is a critical issue in the performing arts area. We can do both. We can make smart, affordable investments in the arts, grow our economy, and improve our quality of life. The challenge grants are a key way to do it. The county should also steadily partner and create that climate that can grow our community. I ask for your vote on November 6th so that I can offer a new vision to help us grow our economy, serve the arts, and improve our community.
Okay, thank you both. Now let's do a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thanks, John. Thank you all for being here.